Scott Spears here for WWGH Radio at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, days before the 100th anniversary of the election of President Warren G. Harding, November 2nd, 2020, 100 years, which I just learned from Craig Schermer, our guest today, would have been Warren Harding's 55th birthday back in 1920, so 155 this particular year. It's a great pleasure to be with the foremost authority, and I'm going to use the word impersonator, now Craig can correct me if I'm wrong on that, of Mrs. Florence Harding in Ohio, Craig Schermer. Craig, I interviewed you as Florence Harding. Do you call what you do an impersonation? How do you define it?
First person.
First person.
Impersonation, I don't know, has the connotation of not quite perfecting it, you're interpreting it, whereas the first person you're trying to walk in their shoes, actually be that person. It's like when you put the clothes on and the hat and everything else, you're taking on their persona. But only after you've done your work.
Craig, it's interesting because the obvious question, I think here, because of the relationship she had with men in her life, and you've said it's still a man's world. We've never had a female president. We've never had a female governor in Ohio. And in Marion, we've never had a female mayor. That all being said, you are a male portraying Florence Harding. What do you think she would make of that?
She would tell me to sit up straight, that my hat was on crooked. I think she would be thrilled with it.
Women who would, I'm sure you've gotten some flack for being a man playing Florence Harding. What do you make of that flack? What do you tell people who give you flack for that? They wouldn't give flack to a woman.
Now I've been doing Florence Harding for 30 years, 25 years. And I've done Mrs. Lincoln, Ellen Wilson, Eleanor Roosevelt, Grace Coolidge, my favorite, Caroline Harrison. I've never had anyone walk out because it was a man doing a woman. And I find that if you take the role that you're doing seriously, and no flamboyant gestures, no overdone makeup, and that the outfits you wear are authentic, and period. They'll sit and listen, but you gotta catch them first. I gave a talk at Mrs. Harding for the Chagrin Falls Historical Society, and the president was a man. He told me afterwards, after I got a standing ovation, that when it was over, he said to me, you know, I didn't want to be here. But I was president of this society, and I didn't want to introduce a man doing a woman. But the minute you started talking and telling Florence's story, I couldn't move from my seat.
You know, Craig, there's something very interesting, and I wasn't sure I was going to bring this up, but I feel very comfortable in doing it now as a journalist. Florence Harding had her days of reckoning. She was asked tough questions about romances her husband might have had, killing her husband, all these horrible, awful things. And it is quite possible, in your time portraying Florence Harding, that the video that people have probably seen the most of is you on The Daily Show from 1999, where Mo Rocca came to interview you. And it was and that's for the first time, and I don't know if you've done it anywhere else, but here on the 100th anniversary, let's answer this at all. When you saw that, what did you think?
I felt degraded. I felt shamed.
Why?
Because they made fun of the man doing a woman aspect and didn't pay any attention to Florence's story. They weren't interested in that. They were out to make fun of a man, a drag show, if you will.
What did they tell you while they were there to get that interview?
Well, you have to understand, I'm not the brightest bulb in the box. I would never claim to be the brightest bulb in the box. I'm a little bit unworldly. Being extremely hard of hearing, I don't hear a lot of things. I don't hear a lot of the innuendo that your voice carries. I had never heard of Comedy Central. I never had cable. So this, fine, they want to interview Mrs. Harding. I went along with it and everything. But as the questions started coming from the gentleman that used the word advisedly, I began to realize that I had backed myself into a rather sticky situation. And my boss at the National First Ladies Library raked me over the coals for it.
When it aired, how did you feel personally?
Well, you have to understand, I didn't see it when it aired. I saw it much later when somebody sent me sent me a video of it. And I was kind of intrigued by the fact that my voice carried a certain amount of sarcasm in it when I had a big poster with all the first ladies on it, from beginning to end. And they point to one and say, who's that and who's that? He must have pointed to Sarah Polk like 3 times. I said, it's still Sarah Polk. But I got they weren't taking me seriously. It was all going to be a joke. I had hoped everybody had forgotten about it, but I guess they haven't.
Well, 21 years later, are you over it now? Are you okay now? Hurt at the time, as you say. Is it okay now?
No.
Still
because
not.
it still was degrading. I would never have allowed anybody who worked for me to treat a performer with the callousness they did me. And then the interviewer talking to Mo afterward, making suggestive questions and treated the whole thing as trivial.